Thank you for watching the first ever episode of TeachMeGrails.com. I am new to Grails, admittedly, and of course I'm not going to be perfect in explaining things, but I will do my best. I come from a 3-year background in Rails and Ruby, and I'm finding a very, very exciting world moving to the Grails community, so I hope you like this. So we're going to go ahead and get started by learning some very basics on Grails. The first thing you need to do is download the Java SDK and install it, and make sure you set the Java home environment variable. After that, you can download and install Grails from grails.org. Once you unload the zipped file into a folder, make sure that you set the Grails home environment variable, and also make sure you add the Grails home bin folder into your path so that you can run the Grails command. Finally, let's test it to make sure that it is working properly. Okay, here you can see we have our terminal open. I will echo out Grails home, and you'll see I do have it set up to my path to the Grails folder. And then if I echo out path, you'll notice right here that I do have the path including the Grails bin folder, which is where our command resides. So for me to test this, I can type Grails help, and if it is installed properly, I should get a list of all of the commands that Grails can run. And we'll talk about those in a second. To find out more about the Grails command, we can go to the framework documentation. To get there, you go to the Grails website, click on documentation, and then you'll see a link here for the official user guide. That's where we want to go. Click there, and you'll see on your left that we have the command line section with all of the different commands that we can run. The first thing we want to do is create an application, so we're going to start there. So to create an application, you type Grails create-app and then the name of the application. In this tutorial, we're going to create a new application called the Nerd Herd, which is going to be somewhat similar to Stack Overflow, but not as complicated and probably not as cool. Okay, so we have our terminal open, and so we're going to write Grails create app nerd herd. It will go ahead and create our complete application that will actually run right out of the box. So once all those files are created, I'm going to go ahead and run the application and show you that we do have a truly working Grails application. After you run the create app command, you're going to want to go into your folder, and then inside there you can run Grails run app. Here you see at the very bottom it does show that we can go to this URL and it will load up the application. And here we go, this is our first Grails application right here. Okay, the first thing I want to do is create a controller. Now the controller is part of the MVC structure, the model view controller, whereas the domain classes are the models and the GSP files are the views. So to create a controller, I'm going to go to my Grails framework reference and look here at create controller. So I'm going to copy this command, and I will go back to my terminal, and I'm going to open up a new terminal here. And I'm going to type Grails create controller home. But actually first I need to go into my application here. So Grails create controller home. It asks if I want to create a package, and actually I do in this, so I'm going to hit no. We'll try that again. Grails create controller com.berry.home. So that way we can give it a package. And there you go. It created three new folders actually: controllers, com.berry, views home, and com.berry. And you'll see it did also create a controller file here. And I'll show you. I'm going to use TextMate to modify this application. So to do that, I just type mate dot, and it will load up the source code directly in TextMate in its own project. So I will open up the Grails app folder and look in controllers. You're going to see we have COM, Berry, and Home Controller. So here's where we're starting. We have our Home Controller. So if I was to go back to my application and refresh here, you'll note that we now have a Home Controller. Now it doesn't do anything because we don't have an index file assigned. So let's go ahead and modify that real quick. Here in our index action or method, we're going to go ahead and just render out hi from Eric. So we'll save that, and I will refresh, and there we go. So you see we have our path for the application, and right here is our controller path, and right here is our action path. So we have just rendering the text, hi from Eric. Now we can also use views, which is where we store our GSP files. And if I want to modify the view for index, I have to go into views and then home, and then here I create a new file called index.gsp. And so I can do this one and save that. It just uses standard HTML. I'll take this out completely, and if I refresh again, here we go. So we are using our GSP file. Now what if I wanted to pass some variables down? It's actually very simple in Grails. What you would do is you would pass down an array, or actually a hash, and I apologize, I'm still new to Grails, so I don't know all of the terminology yet, but you pass down this collection or hash or whatever it's called, and let's say I want to say the name variable is Eric Berry, and I hit save there. So now we go into our GSP file, and instead of having it static there, I would say hi again from name. And if I hit refresh, there we go. It does pass in the variable directly to the GSP. So that's a very simple way to create a controller and a view. Okay, let's make this application a little bit more interesting by involving the database. What I'd like to do is create a new model called herds. And a herd will be basically a question with a bunch of answers that could be provided to answer that question. So to create a new model, it's actually called a domain class in Grails. And if I go back to my documentation, we scroll down and see our domain classes. I hit usage, and you can see how to create a domain class. So I'm going to go back over to my terminal, and let's create a new domain class called herd. So I type that, it will create all of the files necessary to create that domain class. Oops, and I do need to add the package to it as well. So here we go, com.berry.herd, and it will create everything we need. And let's go back to our TextMate and look and see what it created. So if I open my domains folder, or my domain folder, you'll see the package com and berry. Now we have a file called herd.groovy. Now Groovy uses the ability to I'm coming from a Rails background, so it's a little hard for me to explain, but this makes a lot of sense. The way to manipulate your database is by modifying the domain classes. So if I want to create a new table called herd, all I need to do is create a Groovy file called herd, and then within there set my variables up, which will become columns in the herds table. So my first column I want to have is a string, and it's going to be question. And then my second one will be asked by email. So the second one will be actually an email address of the person who asked a question. Okay, after I create the domain class, I want to create a controller that will allow me to manipulate the data in the database. To do so, I'm going to use scaffolding. And this is the shortcut way. If you're new to Grails, is the best way to get going, and also it's excellent for creating admins on the back end. It's not really appropriate for front-end usage, for customer-facing usage, because it is so canned out of the box. But if I do a search for scaffold in here, you'll see I have a scaffolding link on the side, and then it'll show us how to do it. So prior to doing that, though, I do need to create a new controller. So here, let me start this up again. And on our new controller, I'm going to type Grails create controller com.berry.herd. Now, to make it so that it will use the scaffolding, it is important to make sure that the name of the controller is the same name as the name of the domain class. So now that we have that, let's go back to our source code, and in our source code we have our class that we've created. So now let's go to our herd controller, and what I want to do is def scaffold equals true, and I believe that's how it was supposed to be. Yes, it is. So here we go. Let's give it a shot and see how that looks. So okay, so we come back here and we have our new controller, which is the herd controller. So let's click on that, and you'll see here we have a predetermined scaffolding here, and it's our herd list. So let's click on new herd, and this one we're going to have asked by emails. So let's do eric@berry.am, and this is a test question. Let's hit create. So there we go. We have our first item in our database. It says herd 1 created and asked by this person. Question is there. Go back to our list and you see that. But now we don't want this to be a text field. We want it to be a text area. So we want to modify that. The way to do that is by going back into your Groovy file and setting up a constraint. So first, let's say we're going to set a constraint for our question. We're going to make sure that the question can't be blank, and we're also going to make it so that the question can't be nullable, which means that the database won't allow a null field in this. And let's say our max size of the question will be 1,000. So that actually does set it to a text field right there by saying that the max size can be 1,000. And after that, let's go ahead and create the constraint for the asked by email. And let's also say that it can't be blank. False. And it looks like I got this wrong up here. And then let's say that we also tell the system that this is an email. Now, by adding this part, it will actually add validation to ensure that the email address is truly an email address. So we hit save. I'm going to go back to my application, hit refresh. Let's see here. Let's go to our, let's find out what happened. By going here. No such property URL. So here, it's actually, this is our problem. We should not have that. So instead of email URL, it should be email true. So there we go. There's our error. That's how I fixed it. I'm going to try and avoid showing stupid errors like that, but I'll show a few here and there because it is probably good for other people as well as me to be humbled a little bit and make sure that we do know how to find and resolve errors. So here I restarted the application and it looks like it's running fine now. So I'm going to hit refresh, and here we go. Go back into our herd controller, And if I hit New Heard, you see now we have a text field for our question. But also if I hit Create, it will show that we have two fields that cannot be blank. So here I'm going to put why is the sky blue, and let's put in an email address. I'm just going to type that, and you'll note that it is not a valid email address. So let's try that again and type a valid email address, and here we go. We have our question and we have our answer. So let's create one more. Why don't ducks like to fly? Type in another email address, hit create, there we go. So now we're starting to build our list, and to edit them you just click on the ID here. So if I wanted to click that, it'll actually show it, and then here I can edit, do whatever I want. So okay, I appreciate you watching. This is going to be a multiple part series on this screencast. So this is the first one, just to get you going a little bit. If you're new to Grails, I completely appreciate that. I'm new to Grails as well, but I'm very excited to be using it. I come from a 3-year background in Rails and Ruby, and I'm finding that there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of things that I'm starting to see that the Rails community really can learn from Grails. So I'm excited to be sharing this with you, and I hope that you come back and watch some more. Teach Me Grails is currently looking for sponsors to sponsor our weekly screencasts. If interested, please send an email to eric@teachmegrails.com.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!